Okay, so everyone that has joined this call, good afternoon, good evening. I appreciate everyone's time today, and Anil and Rank Secure, thank you very much for your support of our strategic partnership, driving attendance to this informational webinar to educate your network of reselling partners about Orca Security. We're super excited to be here. My name is Chris Lang. I'm part of the channel team supporting our go-to-market efforts to work through partners here globally. So we're very excited to talk about Orca. I'm going to go through several slides of content, paint a vision, tell a story, a little bit about Orca, the value prop, the challenges and problems that we solve for. Then we can open it up to questions, and then Gus, who is on the line as well. He's our Director of Pre-Sales Engineering. He will be prepared to walk you through a demonstration of the platform. And at that point, by all means, interrupt, ask questions, be engaged, and hopefully you get the most out of this. So we're looking forward to this session. So why Orca Cloud Security? Number one, first and foremost, we provide 100% full stack visibility into AWS, Azure, and GCP, deploying in under 5 minutes. And we add value straight out of the gate without any need to deploy agents anywhere in the cloud estate environment. The value that we add straight out of the gate is that because of the manner in which we assess risk and in the manner in which we contextualize alerts, we are able to prioritize for the enterprise organization the 1% of alerts that matter most to the organization. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But at a high level, here's a little bit about Orca in the event that you're not familiar with our organization. We were founded approximately 2.5 years ago by 8 ex-Checkpoint executives. In fact, our CEO, Avi Shua, was Checkpoint's CTO. When they were looking at the market 2.5 years ago or so, they put their heads together and thought that there was a better way to approach cloud security and improve the security efficacy of customers that are migrating workloads to the cloud. So they invented Orca. It's a great product that has taken the market by storm. When I joined the organization in February, I was employee, give or take, number 70, and now we've got over 230. We've received tremendous amounts of funding. You know, our official Series C round was announced in the spring, in the end of March, beginning of April timeframe. That was powered by an investment by Capital G, which is Google's investment arm. They wrote a check to Orca for $210 million, which is pretty significant. And the reason this is relevant is because I'm going to put a slide up, and I just want you to take 15 seconds to read the quote from one of the partners at Capital G. It says a lot about their due diligence and thought process as they considered making an investment in Orca. It's a pretty powerful statement, and thank you for taking a couple of seconds to read that. So from our perspective, you know, Orca was founded on 3 key principles that drive our mission. It's about coverage, comprehensiveness, and context. First and foremost, we firmly believe that coverage is absolutely paramount to true cloud security, but an enterprise can't achieve 100% coverage if they have friction. What do we mean by that? Traditionally, network teams have bickered with security teams who have bickered with DevOps teams, and it's this vicious circle, if you will, of a merry-go-round. And friction interorganizationally kills an ability for the enterprise to deploy a product. And if a security tool can only be effectively deployed on 40, 60, or even 80% of an enterprise's environment, it's virtually useless because unprotected assets are still going to be prime targets for attackers. Secondly, we believe that enterprises need a holistic or a comprehensive approach to cloud security. We don't believe that they should have to buy one tool to detect vulnerabilities, another tool to detect misconfigurations, and another tool to uncover authentication or IAM risk, excuse me, and the list goes on and on. We believe strongly that they should only have to buy one solution that's going to detect all of the key security risks in their cloud environment. And then the third principle is context. There's nothing an enterprise can realistically do to protect their environment if they don't have context. Without it, they're just going to get an endless list of issues and alerts that are not prioritized, and context allows them to visualize the cloud environment as an attacker would with a clear attack path. So we're very fortunate. We're very proud of this slide. It's pretty with lots of nice logos. The two salient data points that I'd like to make. For a company that's 2.5 years old, we have recently onboarded our 120th customer. And more importantly, for an organization of our size, we've got more publicly facing customer testimonials than organizations that have been around a lot longer and who are a lot bigger. Customers love our product. They're not afraid to put their money where their mouth is. There's a ton of testimonials on our publicly facing website. And as I go through some of the slides today, you'll see quotes, publicly facing quotes from enterprise security practitioners of some of our customers. So the reason our story and message is resonating is because there are two major problems with the existing or legacy approaches to cloud security. The first problem is that agent deployments do not scale. On average, we're seeing less than 50% of all cloud assets are covered by all of the security solutions an organization leverages, including those that include agents. And as I mentioned, it's just about impossible to deploy agents everywhere because of the massive interorganizational friction that happens when you try to get agents deployed universally, even in organizations that have a dedicated or functioning team. The second problem is that, I'm sure you'll agree, there are way too many security alerts. We're finding on average that an organization is going to discover approximately 10,000 vulnerability alerts for every 100 assets. And the reason for this is that organizations are using multiple tools that only work in their respective silos. A very good example of this is Palo's Prisma Cloud security solutions. They don't truly understand the overall picture of how security controls relate to one another. And because we are taking the data from the workload plane and the control plane, CSPM functionality, CWPP functionality, combining it into one platform, we have complete visibility, and then we can granularly prioritize the alerts that matter. With an agent-based approach, the onus and the responsibility of adding the necessary context to these tens of thousands of alerts ultimately falls on the shoulders of the security teams within the enterprise. And we already know they're spread thin, right? They're overburdened. They've got way too many alerts and not enough hours in the day to address the challenges that they need to be effective. And the complexity of this grows exponentially when you also consider that these teams are typically responsible for managing tens or hundreds of cloud accounts across thousands of resources. This simply becomes unfeasible. So if you looked at the overall state of the cloud security market, you simply haven't had a lot of viable options. What's out there has been a collection of disorganized, disjointed, and disparate visibility solutions. You have agents that look deep, you have CSPMs that look wide, yet there was no solution that had the breadth and the depth to see everything in your cloud environment and provide the context required to address these two major challenges. So again, our founders responded to this huge gap by inventing a radical new approach to cloud security. We call it side scanning. It's a patent pending technology, and it's very disruptive in the cloud security market. Now we're going to take a look at how it works. So first and foremost, again, recurring theme is one of the value props. Orca does not require any agents, network scanners, or cloud security posture managers, and yet we're able to detect all of the important security risks within the workload without sending a single packet over the network, nor without running any ops code in the environment. So instead of interfering with the enterprise's cloud environment and causing more problems, we're going to collect data with read-only access directly from the workload's runtime block storage. Okay. Second, we combine the intelligence from the workload or the workload plane with the cloud metadata or the control plane, for example, like which security groups cover which workloads, how traffic is routed in your virtual networks, etc. This combination enables Orca to understand the connection between different assets, and it allows us to begin to build the context necessary to truly understand the enterprise's cloud environment in its entirety, and makes up the second key ingredient of our special sauce called contextualization or context-aware security. So the bottom line is this: Orca eliminates the need to integrate with each workload, which means we don't need to get credentials, nor do we need network access, or nor do we need to install ops code in your customer's environment. We're simply going to read from the common shared virtualization environment. And if you guys can go to, if anybody can go to mute, that would be really helpful, because I'm getting some background noise and it's disrupting the flow of the presentation. Thank you.
Kamlesh ji, can you mute? Kamlesh ji, can you mute your thing?
I got it. I muted her. Okay. So sorry, as I was saying, sorry about that interruption. The bottom line is this. We eliminate the need to integrate with each workload, which means you don't need to get credentials, network access, or install ops code in your customer's environment. We're simply going to read from the common shared virtualization environment. And this approach facilitates an immediate understanding of all of these significant risks in the environment and their relative importance. And it allows us to provide 4 key advantages over any other vendor in this market today. Those 4 advantages are 100% coverage, multiple tools in one, alerts that matter, and built-in compliance. So when you look at the onboarding process, it's ridiculously easy and fast. Our one-time deployment process involves 3 easy steps. It's very similar for Azure and GCP. Okay, once the initial scan is complete, which takes approximately 24 hours, depending upon the size of the cloud estate, you'll be able to detect and act on all of the important security risks that the enterprise was probably previously blind to, such as vulnerabilities, malware, leaked and weak passwords, unsecured PII, etc. And again, this happens literally in minutes, not months. Less than 5 minutes, this product will be deployed in these cloud environments. And as I mentioned on some of the earlier slides, one of the biggest obstacles to deploying agents universally is that organizational friction. And given that our side scanning technology reads the underlying block storage of the cloud in an out-of-band manner, there is 0 impact to the end user environment. It's one of the reasons why DevOps teams love our product. In fact, we have a Fortune 500 organizations as customers with multiple accounts, multiple cloud providers who have onboarded their entire cloud estate in less than a week. And any friction that an organization has faced as a result of having to deploy agents and network scanners disappears. We're actually able to enable DevOps teams to focus on the product, which is what they should be doing, instead of asking them to divert their efforts to deploy endpoint agents everywhere and create scanner credentials. Okay. The next key advantage is that Orca provides the ability to consolidate security tools. Given that we detect every important security risk at every layer of the cloud estate, from the control layer to the workload layer to the data stack layer, we can actually replace multiple security tools such as legacy vulnerability assessment tools, CSPMs, and CWPP solutions. From our perspective, it simply does not make any sense to have your vulnerability management platform tell you that 1,000 workloads are at risk due to vulnerabilities, and then you need to go to your CSPM product to determine whether there is a real attack vector involved or not. And then at this point, you still may need to install another distinct agent-based anti-malware solution to detect existing compromises. So going back to what I stated previously, Orca is going to detect all the risks that matter most. Things like vulnerabilities in operating systems and applications, including the components that make up those applications, namely the packages and libraries. Orca is going to detect misconfigurations, machines that have already been compromised, and those neglected orphaned workloads that have flown under the radar, and those that haven't been maintained for years. We can also detect the risk of lateral movement in particular workloads with keys that can be used to access other sensitive resources. We see this a lot. For example, cloud keys left behind that provide root access due to poor security hygiene, or secure shell keys that facilitate access to the entire cloud environment. And again, we do this all within the customer's cloud environment, literally within minutes. So again, this key benefit has been echoed by several of our customers, as evidenced by Thomas Hill from Live Oaks Bank. There's a real consolidation rationalization play for customers who have invested in multiple disparate solutions. So when you talk about alerts, Because we detect every important security risk at every layer of the cloud, the workload and the control plane combined, we don't just see the workload, but we can see its location and the context within. We can see if it's connected to an internal versus external network, which ports are open on the firewall protecting it, and lots more. This is going to permit Orca to take that data and contextualize it for the enterprise in a graph. And visualizing it in a graph lets them quickly discover critical attack vectors that require their immediate attention. Okay, we essentially view their environment through the attacker's lens by visualizing the security risks as an attack vector before an attacker can leverage them. As an example, if we identify what we refer to as an area of imminent compromise because there is a publicly facing web server with PII on it, the end user better take a look at that, that box, if you will. Otherwise, something bad could potentially happen. So this is a key differentiator for Orca, and it's based on the fact that we approach risk differently than other vendors. Other solutions only consider one dimension of risk, for example, the severity of the underlying security issue, and this invariably is going to end up treating the enterprise cloud as a long list of alerts that lack context, leaving them exposed and causing alert fatigue. We see risk as much more than the severity of the underlying security issue. We see it three-dimensionally, meaning risk involves not only the severity of the underlying security issue, but also its exposure. For example, who has access to take advantage of that issue, and what is the blast radius, or what is the potential impact to the business. So we show an order of magnitude fewer alerts than competing solutions because we prioritize risk based not only on the severity of the underlying security issue, but also its exposure, again, who can access it, and the blast radius, or the impact to the business. This translates into significantly fewer critical alerts, resulting in dramatically less time analyzing them, cross-referencing data from multiple tools, engineering costs, and effort. And because of our agentless approach, and our ability to replace multiple security tools such as vulnerability management, misconfig detection, malware detection, file integrity monitoring, etc., we automatically address many of the rigid compliance mandates as evidenced by the clipboard graphic on the right side of the screen. The elegance of our solution transcends to the compliance side because we can automatically run critical checks without the operational burdens and costs of agent-based solutions. So when you look at what an ideal prospect could be or have, if they've got a cloud first or the majority of their infrastructure is hosted in the cloud, they are a great target. If they have a multi-cloud footprint, again, it matters not to us. AWS, Azure, GCP, we're actually going to be coming out for support of Ali Cloud by the end of Q2 FY22. Doesn't matter. Any combination of those cloud footprints, we're going to consolidate that view into our GUI. If they have plans to move to the cloud, but they need the guidance of an easy to use zero impact platform, great target. Or as I had mentioned, if they have multiple tools, they lack visibility, they suffer from alert fatigue, great opportunity to introduce Orca to make their lives easier. Those customers that have the vast majority, 90+% of their infrastructure hosted in an on-premise environment may not be a good target, but I would argue it's a great opportunity to at least plant a seed and drive that conversation, because those customers are invariably at some point going to migrate to the cloud, and they're going to need a holistic cloud security vendor to help meet their needs. I'm not going to read every data point on this slide, but these are some of the basic qualifying questions that you can start to ask your customers. One very common question for those customers that are running Palo Alto that you can ask them is very simply, what percentage of your assets are not protected by Prisma Cloud because you haven't successfully rolled out agents throughout 100% of the estate? Even if they come back to you and they say approximately 20% of our assets are vulnerable, that's a great opportunity to get Orca in there. We've had a lot of success introducing our product to existing Prisma Cloud customers. The customer lights up, they love the product, we get creative, we put together a proposal to meet the needs to cover those neglected assets, and then they fall in love with the product and they shift that spend in our direction versus a renewal. Lastly, the use cases that we cover, these are just an example of several but I'm not going to read every bullet on the slide, but misconfigs, lateral movement risk, compromised assets, etc. So with that, I'm going to open it up to a few questions, and then Gus is going to pop up the GUI and we'll walk you through the platform. So does anyone have any questions?
So, Krish, how the licensing works in this scenario?
Good question. Thank you for that. The product is licensed based off of the number of VMs or compute instances in the cloud estate. We're 100%, truly 100% cloud native, cloud SaaS, architected for the cloud. It's an annual subscription model, tiered licensing. The larger the number of VMs, the lower the per unit cost.
And to opt this solution, will the client require any extra additional cost for the snapshots and everything?
Come on, we have to make poster color paper also.
Sorry, can you ask that question one more time, please?
So get this opt this license, customer has to get any extra costing for this, like apart from your licensing?
I can take that, Chris. Because of the way we work, the SaaS platform, the Orca scanners, the compute is actually launched in our backend, so there's no cost for the compute. As far as snapshots, the snapshots are very short-lived, maybe like 20 minutes or so as we scan them. And so there is really no additional cost. It's about $1 a year per VM.
That means you are saying $1 per year per VM.
Correct.
Okay.
So it's pretty negligible.
Okay. So why I have asked this question, because we should not keep customer in dark, right? We should tell them upfrontly, because this is going to be a extra cost or the negligible cost for you.
You can definitely bring it up. Honestly, because of the SaaS platform, most of the cost is compute. Like, you know, if a customer asks, definitely answer them, but most customers don't even bring it up. I mean, they don't even acknowledge the cost. If you have 1,000 VMs, you know, $1,000 extra a year compared to what they spend on cloud is really
that's correct.
negligible.
But for the smaller customer, that price will be high, right? And what is the minimum license criteria? Like, if how many VMs we start from for the supporting?
So we have a minimum deal size. It's approximately $7,500 USD net to Orca. So as an example, if you have a customer that has 10 VMs that they want to protect, obviously that's a very small deal and transaction, but every customer is important to us. So for those deals that don't meet that minimum deal size, we will add a platform fee to the quote to get the deal to the net of 7,500 USD to Orca.
Okay, so price wise, it is a $7,500. But if I ask about the VM, what is the minimum VM required?
Oh, so that would it would probably be, you know, between 10 and 20. I mean, 10 would be the lowest, at which point we would add the platform fee cost, which would bring that deal size to somewhere between approximately $10,000 USD.
Chris, can I answer that question?
Sure.
Yes, Sanjay, it'll be about 25 VMs. That'll be the minimum here.
Minimum 25
Yeah.
VMs.
So
Okay.
you can take it that. Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so if we don't have any other questions, let's have Gus walk you through the platform. And at a high level, we'll spend about 15 minutes going through that content, and then, you know, interrupt and ask questions along the way. But Gus, go for it.
Perfect. Just want to confirm, can everyone see my screen okay? Just need one confirmation just to make sure.
Yes, Gab.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, so as Chris mentioned, there's three primary things. It's coverage, comprehensiveness, and context, right? That's what we strive to do with the solution. So the first thing, once we connect, again, we are completely agentless. So connecting cloud accounts takes literally 10 minutes, if not sooner. And once you connect, the first thing you'll identify is the inventory, right? As any cloud security architect or engineer, the first thing they want to understand is what actually exists in my cloud estate. Now, the challenge there with a lot of other solutions is you might have to add one account at a time. They might not support a lot of services. But for us at Orca, we can onboard single accounts, or we can onboard entire organizations and capture thousands of accounts all at once. And again, it takes 10 minutes, right? There's no conversation about project planning, about the agents and deploying agents, how long it would take, where should we start first. This is literally a 10-minute API connection, and that is it. Now, in the inventory, this is where you'll identify everything that we discovered across all your accounts, right? So you have the accounts, you can expand and filter them. You also have compute services, such as, auto scaling groups, any different types of services that are obviously in the cloud. We have container support, databases, encryptions and secrets, images, Kubernetes, so including serverless, right? So it goes across the board. This is what we talk about 100% coverage, is that we go out and find what exists in your environment. Now, here you can even see the risk levels from the inventory, although I will talk about the risk levels in a different screen. But the main point here is that you can click on any of these assets and actually identify cloud information about it. You can even navigate to the asset page. You can also search across the board. And we also have an advanced query language, which I will explain in a little bit as well. But one of the primary use cases of our Sonar query language is that customers can create custom alerts, right? Maybe we didn't think about everything out the box. Maybe there's something specially customized in a customer's cloud environment. Customers can literally write a query and create an alert of it and even use it as part of their compliance framework. So many of our customers actually do that. The other thing that we do here when you're looking at VMs is we also look at stopped workloads, right? When you're talking about hygiene and cleanup, you might have VMs that are actually just turned off and never cleaned up. But at the same time, they might be turned off for 2 years, right? They might have a lot of vulnerabilities. Now, because we are agentless, we don't need an agent to be running. We don't need that system to be running. We're simply scanning that snapshot disk that we created, and then we can find all the information on it. Now, we obviously do reduce the risk level on it, but the whole point here is that if somebody turns on a neglected asset with vulnerabilities that's publicly exposed, you might have a big problem, right? So we help not only identify risk, but also help clean up your environment and identify resources that you might no longer need. Now, once we identify everything that exists, the next point that Chris made was comprehensiveness and context, right? This is where we go into our risk dashboard. And this is where we show you the top issues, top 5 issues from different alerts. We also have an alert section, which we'll deep dive into as well. Now, there's 3 main categories for risk for Orca. We basically help with the context that we build, reduce that alert fatigue, and really point customers to what they need to focus on, okay? Now, you will see here at the top, we have compromise, imminent compromise, and hazardous alerts. There's also one other one called informational, which I'll speak about in a little bit, but that is used more for compliance. Now, if we look at compromise alerts, those are the first things we want to look at, and those typically relate to malware. Okay, now with malware, what you'll typically see is that customers do potentially have a CrowdStrike agent or Sentinel-1 agent or Symantec, whatever it might be. But the problem, as Chris mentioned, is that they're not deployed everywhere, right? If you're depending on, deploying agents, it's not an easy task in the cloud, especially when new systems are being created. You might have developers that are creating accounts. They might not be following all the steps to install agents and properly secure your systems. And so you have a gap of coverage. And on top of that, we also find that not all malware is detected by current vendors, right? So we actually do find malware infections, during POCs, where customers are creating incidents and breaches because, again, they either failed to detect with their current AV solution or they didn't have those agents installed. Now, on a malware alert, you will see the malware that we find. You will see the information, SHA. We also show you a virus total link just to see what other vendors might be saying about it. But the whole point here is starting that if you have malware, it could be a potential compromise. Now, the imminent compromise alerts are pretty much the ones that you really need to focus on next. Okay, this is the things that are publicly exposed, assets, things that have PII and are publicly exposed, things that can be easily brute forced. Now, what we do here, especially around vulnerability management, for example, is we scan the virtual machines or containers and images for vulnerabilities. But if you take an example of existing vulnerability solutions, right, the output is usually a list of 1,000 servers, for example, that are vulnerable to a very high CVSS score vulnerability. Now, think about the next steps that happens after that report, right? A team of vulnerability analysts might have to go to different teams. Maybe there's a Linux team, a cloud team, a Windows team, and they have to start asking questions. Where do these servers live out of these 1,000 servers that I have in this list? Which ones might contain PII? Which ones are in the cloud? Which ones are publicly exposed? It takes a lot of time to really help identify what do we need to work on immediately before it's actually exposed and basically an attacker can get into our environment very easily. Now, Orca does all that work for you because we have both the cloud data plane information as well as the workload information. So when we see vulnerabilities, we're not just simply saying, here's a list of 1,000 servers that have it. We're doing a lot of work to tell you which of these vulnerabilities is likely to get exploited, and that's what the imminent compromise means. As an example here, we have a web service unpatched with Web Engine X, right? And if we take a look at this specific alert, you will see here a few different data points. Now, the first thing is that we're automatically classifying that we see a web service running on this server, okay? We are able to identify the services that are running on it. Then we're also looking to see, okay, is this exposed to the internet? Yes, it is. We also tell you that we have found that it's unpatched, right? So these are the reasons why we're telling you it's an imminent compromise. The other part here is we're also labeling, right? If it's easily exploitable, if there's remote code execution, and bear with me for a second, too many tabs open. All right, so as I was saying, here we have the Web Engine X, right? We're classifying this information. Now, the other part is we're not giving you a list of 1,000 vulnerabilities in this alert, right? What we're telling you is these are all the related vulnerabilities that all roll up to just simply Engine X being unpatched. So between us identifying the vulnerability on the system and also understanding not only is this VM running a web server and listening on the VM on port 80, we also know that on the cloud configuration, it's also allowing port 80 from the security group. We see that it has a public IP address, and we know that both those data points would allow an attacker to get into the environment. Whereas if you're looking at a workload specific solution, you might only get that this server has a vulnerability, but it won't tell you if the cloud configuration actually allows an attacker to even get into it, right? So it might generate a false positive. And vice versa, if you're using a CSPM solution, you might see that the ingress port is open and it has a public IP address, but what if the VM is not even running that service, right? So it actually, those other solutions create a lot of work for the investigation to really understand, is this really true that I need to work on this or not? Orca does this automatically right outside the box. Now, on the comprehensive front, as you can see here, we have malware, we have vulnerabilities, we also have neglected assets, simply telling you, we're not going to give you a list of 1,000 vulnerabilities on a single VM. We're going to tell you that you have a VM that hasn't been patched for years, And this is what you need to do. Just simply go and update the system. There's no point in telling you that it has 1,000 vulnerabilities. We also show you authentication risks, right? So we have weak host passwords, for example. When we see, for instance, an SSH server being opened to the world, and we also look at the passwords that it has, we can understand that it has a weak password. Okay, so the brute force capability of somebody brute forcing the server because it's publicly exposed, and we've also identified that it has weak credentials, is very likely, and this is why, again, we're calling this an imminent compromise. The other part is lateral movement. We can see here, again, that we have imminent compromises, but we also have some hazardous, right? So the last part here is the hazardous alerts. Hazardous alerts are things that are not publicly exposed, but still create a lot of risk internally. So if the attacker was able to get onto the system, they would be able to move laterally within the environment. As an example here, if we take a look at the insecure private key, we're calling this hazardous because even from an insider threat perspective, an attacker that might have gained access to the system or a person that should not be on the system can get access to other assets. In this case, we have found a private key file that contains obviously the private key. And what can we do once we find that? Well, we can actually go to our production servers and move laterally because now we can actually authenticate with them. So we show you lateral movement risk. And of course, this is also with roles, users, and things like that. We also have data at risk, right? So when we find sensitive data like PII on public assets, we want to make sure that we point that out to you, as well as malicious activity when we find any type of access, for Azure or AWS from malicious IP addresses, and of course, IAM misconfigurations. Okay, so we have a very comprehensive list of security, and this is why we're able to replace many different vendors and solutions and consolidate for organizations. The alerts page will actually show you the deep dive, right? So here you can actually go and group things as you'd like. You can see a different list of categories, the assets. So when we're grouping, we can actually change the grouping to whatever we like, right? Maybe a customer wants to say, I don't want to go by category, but what I really care about is my production account. And I want to see the risks that apply, right, from the risk level, then the account by asset type and the alert type. What this really helps you do is focus on remediations, okay? Because now I know that if I go into my imminent compromise, I see I have a couple test accounts, which I don't really care to work on, but I see I have 16 alerts on my production account, which is my focus. Here, I can see I have alerts on virtual machines, S3 buckets, load balancers, and containers. And if I expand that, I can see the type of alerts, right? So weak host password, for example, or an S3 bucket that has an insecure private key. So even if I look at the hazardous in my production account, let's say I want to focus on IAM misconfigurations and I want to resolve issues with my IAM roles. We have a huge list of things that you need to work on, but again, they're always prioritized, okay? Now, the one thing I want to show you here is the informational alerts. If we show you the informational alerts, you'll see that we have almost 19,000 informational alerts. Now, a lot of other solutions will basically tell you that you have 19,000 alerts, and a lot of them will be critical. If you look at what other solutions call critical, it could be simple configuration checks, which cause no risk, but it's pretty much basic hygiene, right? For example, if an S3 bucket is not encrypted, it's not a critical alert from a risk perspective. It might be a critical configuration that you need to do, but from an actual risk, it doesn't mean that an attacker can get to the S3 bucket. It doesn't mean that the S3 bucket even has any data on it. So why do I need to mark that as critical? And this is where Orca is really helping customers understand what is actually at risk versus not. Now, the informational alerts, as I mentioned before, are used for compliance checks, okay? And if we go into our compliance view, this is where we can show you all the different frameworks that we have. Close that out real quick. course, my internet is in and out. Boom. Sorry about that. Seems there we go. All right, so these are all the compliance frameworks that we have. We have like 35 to 40 out of the box, from CIS controls for the cloud to best practices from Orca, PCI, DSS, ISO, and we even have workload-based compliances, right? If, for instance, you're looking at securing your cloud misconfigurations, but at the same time you have Red Hat machines that are running, you want to make sure that you're following best practices for both, not just one or the other. Now, here you can select which ones you want to see in your view, but at the end of the day, they will be listed here, and the calculations of what is pass versus fail will automatically be checked for you. So for example, if I'm looking at AWS CIS, I can see my average score is 31%. I'm failing a lot of controls. Now, let's say one of my items is to, do better, for instance, in identity and access management. So what I can do here is look at my identity access management CIS related controls, and I can see that I've passed and failed. But if I'm only concerned about which ones I'm failing, I can filter that out very quickly, look at that, and basically what you'll be able to do is click on any of these controls, and it will be linked back to the alerts that we were just looking at, right, to help you actually resolve them. So everything is linked back to an alert. It's very easy to understand what is actually failing and the reason why. And of course, you can export all this information that I have shown you here. Now, the last item is the settings page. One of the key components to Orca is integrating into existing workflows, right? Many customers don't simply want a solution that's just siloed. They want to make sure that it can integrate into their ticketing systems, into their SOAR platforms. So we have a lot of different out-of-the-box integrations. Many of our customers use our Jira and ServiceNow, right? Because you can create automations to automatically open up Jira requests. You can also send to SIMs and SOAR solutions to automatically create remediation steps from those solutions. But the whole point here is that we integrate into a lot of different workflows. The alerts and automations will help you create those workflows if you want to right out the box. It's as simple as using a template. Create automation. So I can simply change what Orca is actually saying as well. So if I want to say what an alert type is, for example, I don't know, any of these, right? Overprivileged VM instance, and it's in an account, for example, that's my developer account or a very test account. Well, I don't really care about those alerts, so I don't want to see them. What you can do is simply tell Orca, change the severity when you see this specific type of alert on this account, and change it to informational, or dismiss it altogether. Or maybe I want to open up tickets in Jira automatically based on specific templates, right? So you have the option to do many different things here and actually create automation processes. And the last step here is, how do we actually get started? It literally takes 5 to 10 minutes, right? We support Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud. There's 3 steps within each of these accounts. So all you need to do is log into your AWS account, click this CloudFormation script, and basically click create. Within about a minute, you'll have the ARN that you plug in here, connect account, and that is it. So again, no agent deployment, reduction of alert fatigue, full inventory, and you basically have those 3 C's covered, which is coverage, comprehensiveness, and context to help teams across the board. So I know we're running short on time here, so I just want to pause there and ask any questions. There's obviously many other things I can show here, but we're just limited on time. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. Any questions from anyone?
Yes, I think no questions.
Okay. If there's no questions, I would like to actually show you one more thing just to make sure we cover it. And that is our Sonar query language. So this is a very, very powerful tool within the solution. The reason for that is because we're ingesting a lot of information across the board, right? We are basically again, covering a lot of different services across their cloud providers, and customers automatically want to create some type of alert or look for something. So if you, for instance, want to look for vulnerabilities with, specific CVSS scores, let's say equals 9, you can automatically search for this information and it'll pull it up, right? But even if you wanted to go a step further and say, I want to find any compute with vulnerabilities that have a CVSS score, for example, of 9 and is public facing, right? So I want to know, I don't care if it's an AWS, Azure, or GCP. I just simply want to know any compute that has a vulnerability with a score of 9 and is also internet facing, please show me that list, right? So you can actually query this information. You can see here we have one item that will actually be exposed, and we can go and work on it, right? So you can click on it, go to the asset page. But the biggest thing here is that if this is something that you want to always get notification from, you can create a custom alert, right? So you can test it, create it. This will automatically be listed as you'd like. So you can name the alert whatever you want. You can mark it as a specific severity. You can give it a specific category and even map it to your own compliance framework. Okay, so you can create custom compliance frameworks as well. All right, and that is the end of the demo. Of course, there's deeper dives we can go into, but again, I will ask for any questions with 5 minutes left. Otherwise, if there are none, I will pass it back to you, Chris.
Anyone, any questions? All right, then, Gus, I think we'll end it here. Thank you, everyone, for being here and taking out the time. Really appreciate it. I thank you, Chris and Gus, for a fantastic presentation. And
our pleasure.
It's our pleasure, Anil. Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Anybody, any
Thank you.
questions for the last time? Or
Yeah, it's like I do require somebody's gas mail ID, so we can have any technical difficulties. We could able to send a mail and get the sorted out.
Bhuvnesh will, I'll share it with you. I'll come back to you on that.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Anything? So great. We'll end the session here. Thank you, everyone. And you guys in the US have a good day, and guys in India have a good evening. See ya.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks. See you.
It's a technical background of this. How to configure all those things. It's good. Orca.